Father, for this opportunity to experience church in a whole new way. Lord, I pray right now that those who are following along, God, that they would have experienced something delightful in their own homes. God, that this would be incredible for them. Lord, and that they would be willing to embrace the power of, with families, singing song and worshiping you. God, that these moments that we find ourselves in a society that we didn't think we would, or perhaps we had planned on it or thought it would come, but we didn't realize just what it was going to be like. Father, as we have found ourselves in our homes, often feeling trapped there, that as this comes, Lord, that it would be encouraging, that it would be motivating, that it would be something so marvelous, so mighty, so amazing. Thank you, Father, for your goodness. It's in your name we pray, Jesus. Amen. Worship team will be up at the end of my message this morning to sing another song. I'm blessed to be able to participate like this. Last week we started off, and I think it went okay. I know that there was some glitches in the video and stuff. If there's any issues, let us know. Just know this as well, that the message is being recorded on a different camera. So if there is issues with this upload or this happening, then we'll upload it at a different time, and we'll make that available to you through YouTube. But we're delighted you guys are here. We're just excited. I don't know where you guys are at. I know that with this kind of experience, we can reach farther than just our area. And so some of you guys have already launched some of those watch parties. Forgive me, I'm kind of new to some of these new things on social media. I know I've been on for a long time, but as I was looking at the social media feeds, I saw that you guys were doing, watch parties to try to encourage others to come and all that stuff. So it's just incredible to be able to do something like this. It's just amazing. And so real quick, before I start preaching, I just want to challenge you and encourage you with something. Number one, I just want to thank you for your faithfulness. I want to thank you for those who are responding and giving through our online giving portal, who are sending checks into our church. Just thank you so very much. As you guys have probably noticed in society and noticed what is happening, jobs are being lost, people are finding themselves in an economic crisis. And I know that it's difficult. I know that it's challenging. I know that we are in new territory. I know that God is faithful, though. I mean, just this last week, there are some pretty amazing things that have happened in my family and within the church that have just made it very clear that God is involved, made it very clear that God is going nowhere, that God is doing things. So I would just ask you, continue to be faithful, continue to get on to the online giving portal, put in your information, give some money, continue to write checks in, however way you need to bring it to us. Give us send us a message on social media, whatever you need to do to get a hold of us so that you can continue to give to the ministries of this church. It is so valuable. We so value you. We so value you. As you guys know, or some of you know, as you've been watching this, we're on a series called The Road, and right now we're on part 3. So the first week we talked about distraction. We were going in and talking about Jesus' entry on the donkey and how there was this amazing moment that happened on Palm Sunday, but all around him was so much noise that could be so very distracting. And so thank you. My prayer and hope is that we begin to understand through this sermon series that there are different things, like we are crowded by distraction. Last week we talked about painful betrayal and how pain is experienced in our lives. Pain is experienced. Judas betrayed Jesus, and how that painful experience was a part of the plan. However difficult and challenging and unfortunate it was. Now, this morning I want to talk to you about dread. I want to talk to you about a detour that happens in our life, a detour of dread. And I know that a lot of us are journeying in this new territory in our lives, but sometimes we look forward to the future. We look forward to the events that we know are coming up, and it creates dread in our hearts. It creates dread in our life. I mean, Jesus Christ himself, as he considered what was going to happen on the cross, experienced something so very intense and painful in the Garden of Gethsemane. It was just an incredible moment that the Lord shared there. So he had just finished having the Last Supper, supper with his disciples, a supper that meant something so valuable, so beautiful, something that we celebrate each month in church, and something that you need to value and go in and study for yourself and learn more about that. But for this morning, I want to talk to you guys about Gethsemane. I want to talk to you guys about what happened after they had had their last meal. And so this morning, okay, we're going to go there. I'm going to pray real quick that God would just inspire and encourage. And it might be surprising to you, but sometimes it is a little more nerve-wracking, a lot more nerve-wracking to be live than be with my people. Because if I mess up, it's there. So anyway, Father, we thank you for today. We thank you for this morning. Encourage us. Lord, may today be filled with blessing. Lord, I know that we are in our homes watching on our computer screens or television screens or our cell phones, whatever it is that we are watching this on now or at a later time. Lord, that it would encourage us, it would inspire us. Lord, as we consider what Jesus experienced and what we experienced, that we would find strength today. Amen. I'm going to jump through several different Gospels to give you guys the full story. But in Matthew 26:30, they have finished their meal and they're heading towards the Mount of Olives. And it says that they sang a hymn. Now, I want you to consider this, okay? Jesus had just talked to the disciples and talked to Judas, saw him leave, knew what was coming, and somehow he found it within himself to still sing hymns. He found it within himself to still praise God, even though he knew what was coming. As we've been reading in previous weeks, we know that there is joy, there is this delight that Jesus experienced, knowing that the sacrifice that he was going to make, it mattered. It had value. It was so very critical and important to him. He so loved us that it was something that he actually jumped towards and walked towards. He took the road towards it in joy, as the scripture says. And in Matthew 26, jumping to another portion of that, 36 through 38, it says, Then Jesus went with them to the olive grove called Gethsemane. And he said, Hey, sit here while I go over there and pray. And he took Peter and Zebedee, two sons, James and John, and he became anguished and distressed. He told them, My soul is crushed. My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. And then jumping to another gospel as it reads, Luke 22:44, it says, And being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and the sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. Being so anguished, being so just caught up in this moment. I can't remember the medical term, but for those of us who have studied this, we know that this is a possible scenario. This is something that can indeed happen. And jumping to back to Matthew 26, verse 39. And so he went on a little farther and bowed with his face to the ground, praying, My Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken from me. Yet I want your will. He turned to the disciples and found them asleep. And he said to Peter, Couldn't you watch with me for even 1 hour? Keep watch and pray, so that you will not be given you will not give into temptation. For the spirit is willing, but the body is weak. Then Jesus left them a second time and prayed, My Father, if this cup cannot be taken away unless I drink it, your will be done. Following along in verse 43, it says, When he returned to them again, he found them sleeping, for they couldn't keep their eyes open. So he went to pray a third time, saying the same things again. And he came back to the disciples and said, Go ahead and sleep. Have your rest. But look, the time has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Up, let's be going. Look, my betrayer is here. I just want you to think about this for just a moment. They're heading towards this garden. I want to give you guys just a little bit of a glimpse of what this Garden of Gethsemane really means. It was a place where olive oil was created. It was a place where olives would be crushed. If you look at the different historical things that were valued there, if you think of olive oil, it was considered one of the most important substances for life. It was rich, golden oil, and it was to light the home in every family in Judea. Oil was also used to light the inner chamber of the temple in Jerusalem. It was used to cook most food, and in particular was used in the process of making bread. Olive oil was also used to create many ointments that were used for both the living, for healing purposes, and for the dead, to anoint bodies prior to them being placed in the tomb. Oil was also used to anoint kings, priests, prophets. In short, olive oil played the central part of a lot of the traditions of that day. Now, I want you to consider for just a moment the experience that Jesus is facing and just what this oil, what had to happen in order for the oil to be created. You see, the olives were taken off the trees and they were crushed. They were put in a large stone basin. In fact, a donkey was used to push in a horizontal beam, and it was rolled over with this millstone, and it would crush ripe olives into the basin, into a pulp. It would crush them. And then the olive press is what would happen next. I mean, it wasn't enough for the olives to be crushed to create the olive oil. They would take it another step. After the olives were shaken from the tree and they were crushed, after they were crushed into a pulp-like state, once they were there, they were placed in a bag and put on a strainer of sorts. And a heavy stone slab would be lowered onto the olives that had already been crushed in the olive crusher. And gradually, the slabs of weight would squeeze the olive oil out of the pulp, running down into the pit. And the oil was collected in clay jars. You see, Jesus' anguish is illustrated by this garden and the process of its trees of olives, its olive trees. I want you to think about this. I want you to consider this. This crushing experience, this pressing experience, that God's body would be crushed, it would be broken, that his body would be broken, and that he would be pierced, that the very thing that gives him life, his blood would be shed, because someone had to. You see, God would not be a good God if he wasn't a just God. And we are sinful, and our sin requires payment. It requires punishment, and in that requirement of punishment, someone had to take our place. Not just ordinary anyone, a perfect man. And so Jesus would be in this Gethsemane, and he would experience these moments where he would be filled with anguish, that he would actually ask God, hey, Father, don't let this happen. If I can pass over this, if I can do it a different way, if it can happen on at another possibility, then please, Lord, please. You see, the image of Gethsemane on this slope of the Mount of Olives where Jesus went the night before his crucifixion provides a picture of Jesus' suffering. It provides a picture of Jesus' suffering. You see, the dread of what the future would hold manifested itself through blood pushed in his sweat that his glands had poured out. Let me read that again. The dread of what the future would hold. It manifests itself. In him, it manifested itself through the blood that was being pushed out through his sweat glands. Jesus was going to wear the weight of earth's every sin. The weight of earth's every sin. Now, I know that there is no way possible that we could even begin to contemplate with our physical intelligence or our greatest wisdom just how much suffering Jesus experienced. The physical pain, the emotional pain, the spiritual pain, all of these different things, the psychological pain, the emotional and psychological was already beginning to unfold in the garden. It was already beginning to happen. But I believe that all of us in this life, we all experience places that mirror the experience of Christ in the garden, pleading with God for a different road to walk. It's the place of our crossroads. And sometimes we choose the road opposite of God's purpose for our life. Sometimes we do. You see, Jesus was experiencing this pressing. He was experiencing these moments of dread, of being crushed, of being pressed. It was unsettling, but it was true. It was uncomfortable, but it's real. However, when we look at this story, we see hope has a true manifestation, a human being, the Son of God. And so when we find ourselves in these places, because we will, some of us right now, we are experiencing that. We are on new ground. We are walking through new territory. Some of you guys never thought that you would be homeschooling your children, and you are losing your mind. It has been so hard for you to experience this. Some of you are walking a road that you never thought. Some of you teachers that are watching right now, you are learning a new form of teaching. You have had to mobilize your skills and begin to use them in an entirely different way. You've had to use technology as your platform instead of physical interaction. And I know teachers, I know because I work with children too, I know that there is something to be said about that experience that we have with kids that are sitting right in front of us, interacting, talking, laughing, crying. You know, and now you're on a new, everything's different. You're trying to do Zoom and just learn all these different technologies to be able to communicate with kids and help them learn. You know, there are roads that we're going to walk that we never thought. Some of you teenagers that are watching right now, you're frustrated because you never thought that you would be in a place where you would have to learn at home. Like you are about ready to choke out one of your siblings. I mean, not like until they're gone, okay, just until they rest for a little bit because you need some respite in your ears. Anyway, so you know what I'm saying though. Like there's all new things that are happening. And so the decision of Christ in these moments can be resolves that we also take on ourselves. And so I want to just real briefly, four things. We need to resolve that we will not face dreadful times alone. We will not face dreadful times alone. I put this kind of in an image on my social media outlets that I use, that we should call it physical distance, we should call it physical distance, okay, not social distancing. Because I know that social distancing is something that happens in our lives when we're interacting in public, but there's also a sense of social distancing that is happening on online forums. You know, I know that social media like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, all those different things, were never meant to take the place of physical interaction. But right now, we need to use it as a part of our interactions with others. We should call it physical. We should call it physical, not relational. We should call it physical distancing, not social distancing. You see, we can't do this alone. We can't face dreadful times alone. I know that Jesus was in the garden there, and he was frustrated. He was frustrated with his disciples that went with him, and they fell asleep, and then they fell asleep again. And then they fell asleep. He was so overwhelmed. But the truth is that in all of Jesus' journeys, and all the roads that he walked, in all his ministry, he chose not to be alone. He chose to have people with him. He chose those people. And we sometimes think, oh, well, those were just the people that he was sowing into and that he was investing into. But I imagine that these people, that these 12 that he was with, also provided him with strength. Also provided him with his need for relationship. I mean, Jesus came because he loved us. And so he's upset, he's frustrated. Now, we know that the disciples, man, they vacated. I mean, they moved out fast when Jesus started to head to the cross. But if you look at the story itself, Jesus Christ on the cross, dying, made it a point to make sure that his mother was being taken care of. And one of the disciples, John Zebedee, he was there. He was there with her. So in all of this, disciples running away, there were those who were there present as he was dying on the cross. That he was dying on the cross. Jesus chose to not do this alone. He chose not to live life alone. He chose to invest in people. We can't do this alone, church. We can't do this alone. Some of us, this is your moment, this is your opportunity. You're watching right now, and it's time for you to check on someone because you know that they're doing it alone. Some of us, we have the privilege, even though we get frustrated with the people that are in our house, we have people with us. You know what I'm worried about? I'm worried about those who live alone. Those who don't have people with them. Those who feel more secluded than we can even begin to understand. Those who get on a social media website, whether that's Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and they use that as a hopeful platform to engage others, but it helps a little bit, but they still feel absolutely lonely. You guys, we can't do this alone. We can't do this by ourselves. We can't. Number two, I will pray with raw honesty. I will pray with raw honesty. You see, in Hebrews 5:7, it says, while Jesus was here on earth, he offered prayers and pleadings with a loud cry and tears to the one who could rescue him from death. He did. Jesus did. Jesus did. In that garden, Jesus said, if this cup can pass over, if I don't have to drink of this, if I don't have to do this, then make it so, God, but your will. His prayers were raw. His prayers were honest. His prayers were bold. His prayers were out there so raw, so real, so emotionally driven that he would sweat blood. Jesus was raw with his prayers. We need to learn to do the same. We need to learn to do the same. You need to be willing to step out there in faith and say, okay, I am going to be raw. I'm going to be real. It may look as though it is ugly in our delivery. You don't have to be eloquent. Sometimes all you need to say with tears and snot running down your face, Jesus. And he knows what it means. He knows what you need. He knows what you're experiencing. He knows your desperation. He knows. Immediately he knows what's going on in your life. And you need to pray with raw emotion. There are moments in my life where I've prayed with raw emotion, where my prayers have been raw, where my prayers have been real, where I've been devastated by life, circumstance, and situation, and I ask God, Lord, just, Jesus, please, change the situation, change the scenario, do something about it. And my emotions, my feelings, my stepping out there in faith was so raw, so real, so painful. God's shoulders are big enough, though. God's shoulders are big enough. I'm not telling you to intentionally disrespect or be awful to him. I'm just telling you to be real about your prayers. I'm telling you to be honest about your prayers. I'm telling you that it's okay. It's okay to speak of your suffering to God in a very raw way. Some of you, right now, your prayers are raw. Some of you, this COVID-19, some of you are in a hospital watching this, just by accident. Or you have loved ones that you know. Maybe they're across the state, maybe they're in another country, I don't know. But you have loved ones that you haven't seen for some time, and they're sick. Or they're sick, and you don't know if they have the virus, but you just know they're sick. It's terrifying. Those are the moments that you pray with raw emotion. Those are the moments that you just shout out there that you are desperate for Jesus. Number three, I will pray with, I'll remember Jesus has been where I am. In Hebrews 4:15 it says, for we do not have a high priest, speaking of Jesus, who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses. But we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet was without sin. Was without sin. I know, we like to kind of belittle it a little bit and make it not sound so bad when we say we make mistakes, but we're not mistakers, we're sinners. I mean, that's just real. Some of our mistakes, as we assume that they're mistakes, are premeditated, they're planned out. We're intentional about them. Yes, we're sinners. And Jesus himself, he's been where we are. He's been there already. He's done that already. In fact, he has experienced more pain and more suffering. He's experienced real temptation in so many ways. Some of you are facing temptation right now. You are facing this detour of dread. You are stuck at home now a lot. And when you're stuck at home a lot, you're alone with your thoughts. You're alone with your temptations. You're alone with things that you haven't visited in a long time. Maybe you've been too busy. Maybe you've been too busy to look at things on screens that you shouldn't be looking at. Maybe you're too busy. Maybe you've been too busy to look at, to type in those things that you know you shouldn't type in, and go to the websites that you know you shouldn't go to, where women and men are exploited. You know what I'm talking about. Maybe you've been too busy to pick up that drink, and now you're at home. Now you've got a lot of time at home, and you know that you've got a stash somewhere, or you know how to find it really quick. Maybe it's not a drink. Maybe it's another substance. Maybe it's something that you had those Percocet or those Darvocet or whatever they are, and you've been hiding them, or you've been putting them in the back of the closet because you know that at some point you're going to hurt yourself again, and you may need them. And then suddenly you find yourself gravitating towards them because they just make you feel numb and okay. You see, Jesus was where you are. He experienced what you experienced. He's been where I am. He's been where you are. And he can be trusted. He can be leaned on. We can ask him for help. We can ask him for support. And as we move on to thinking about sinfulness and other things, we also need to realize that he was crushed. When we feel crushed and overwhelmed, he was crushed too. We feel like our strength is gone. His strength was gone too. We feel like we've been broken. He was broken too. We feel like we have lost out and our spirit is being anguished. He's been there too. We've experienced emotional trauma, spiritual trauma, whatever it is. Our physical bodies are beginning to experience the sensations of what it feels like to be in a constant state of depression. Some of us, we haven't opened the curtains for a while. And if we have, we really haven't looked outside. Some of you don't even have nice things to look outside of your building. And you need to know that Jesus was indeed in painful places. And he wants to be there with you in your painful places. Your painful experiences. You know, sometimes when we don't have a lot of things to keep us busy, it demands that we think about the things that we've ignored for so long. Number 4, I will surrender to God's better plan because please take this cup of suffering away from me, yet I want your will to be done, not mine. After praying, he turned and faced his captors courageously. He went and woke them up and said, look, my betrayer is coming. He looked to the one. He looked to the one he knew was coming to betray him with a kiss, and he embraced it. He knew that this was God's plan. He knew that this was God's purpose. Again, reading Hebrews 12:2 as I've been reading it because it just so compels me. In Hebrews 12:2 it says, we look away from the natural realm and we fasten our gaze onto Jesus, who birthed faith within us and who leads us toward into faith's perfection. His example is this. Because his heart was focused on the joy of knowing that you would be his. He endured the agony of the cross and conquered its humiliation, and now sits exalted at the right hand of the throne of God. Why? He loved you. His heart was so focused on the joy of knowing that you would be his. That's what it was. That was God's plan for his life. That was God's purpose for his life. That's what God had designed for him. That's what his Father had designed for him. That's what God wanted him to do. And he surrendered to that. Jesus Christ, being the Son of God, being the perfect one, actually himself said, I don't want to do this. I don't want to. I mean, we've been there before. Some of us grown adults, man, we're tired of hearing our kids say, I don't want to. Well, you're going to have to. I don't want to. You can't fire your teachers. You can't fire your principals. And I can't expel you. I mean, it wouldn't be good. The society wouldn't be favorable. It wouldn't. But you know you've been there before. Like you get up and you're just like, I don't want to do this. This is overwhelming. This is so frustrating. I don't want to do this. And God's like, look, I got a better way. I got a better plan. I know it's going to be painful and I know it's going to be hard. And I know you're going to dread what's coming or what has come or what you're in the middle of. But you need to know that God has a purpose. He has an intent. He is doing something so very beautiful in your life. You have to know that. And it's been hard for me at times. This whole new experience, this whole new form, I'm looking right now at an iPhone camera talking to you. And it's beautiful that we have been created. We've had this opportunity to share with the world. We've had this opportunity to give our love and affection that pastors, churches all over the world are just converging on social media, that the gospel is being presented. The videos of all different kinds are flooding the feeds of social media. And that's beautiful. But I tell you, I miss hugging my folks. I miss hugging my folks. I miss being there. I miss the hand-in-hand prayers. I miss that. I miss that. As I know you do. I miss it. I miss you. And I don't understand. I know that the world is broken, and I know that sin has devastated us, and it has just infiltrated. I know. But I'm going to trust God's plan. Did God bring COVID-19? No. Our world is devastated. Sinfulness is a part of the initial bad decision of Adam and Eve. Not only, sin entered the world, but it corrupted everything, and it has corrupted all things. It's corrupted all things. But I am telling you right now that the Lord is going to use it for His good. I'm telling you right now, the fight that is being created in us is a fight that we've not had. This is demanding attention in our life. It is requiring us to do things that we didn't think we could. It's demanded of us. And I don't see it all the way through. I don't see it completely. I don't see it clearly. I just know. And sometimes I get frustrated and overwhelmed, and I feel like I don't know, but I just know that God is faithful. I mean, as I was sharing with you guys earlier, as we were talking about investing in ministry and continuing to give, there was just some beautiful things that happened this week that are just proof to the fact that God is concerned about our family. Just the blessings that came in the form of groceries even. The blessings that came in the form of financial support for our church. It is just so very beautiful how God reveals His faithfulness to us. Erwin McManus, he's an incredible minister in LA. He says this: we have to ask ourselves, am I really trying to discern God's will or determine whether I want to do it? Am I really trying to discern God's will? Because a lot of us, we're like, I'm trying to discern, I'm trying to figure it out, I don't know what's going to happen, I don't know how this is going to work. We're trying to discern it, but really what we're doing is we're trying to discover, we're trying to determine, is this really what I want? Is this really what I want? Is this really what I want to do? Is this really what I want to accomplish with my life? Is this really where I want to go? Is this really what I want to happen? And it's so hard. It's so difficult. It's so challenging for us to say, okay. But we have to be willing to surrender. We have to be willing to embrace. We have to be willing to say, okay, Jesus Himself was willing to surrender to God's plan, His Father's plan. We too need to be willing to surrender to His plan. I'm telling you, it's a better one. It's more incredible. It's more amazing. It's more beautiful. It's more wonderful. Making a little bit of room for the worship team. Come back up. We're going to sing another song. I know, church, that this is hard. Those who are watching right now, I know this is hard. I know it's difficult. I know it's unsettling. I know it's not easy. I know it's uncomfortable. I know it's just, it feels like too much. But the dread that you experience, Jesus experienced. The dread that you experience, Jesus experienced. Let's sing another song together. Make some noise in your house. I know it might sound kind of silly, but sing with your kids. I don't know, do something, dance a little bit. Just love Jesus from wherever you are.
Broken from miry this mountain and